Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Founders Playbook from Lab to Launch. The typical startup advice doesn't work for deep tech founders. You can't just move fast and break things when your product has been developed over a decade of peer-reviewed research. You can't just follow the Silicon Valley playbook when you're navigating intellectual property with the university and trying to find capital for hard tech in a capital-constrained world. So where do you get the answers? You get them from someone who's actually done it. And our guest today is Luke Cullen, founder of Material Difference. He's lived through the entire lab to launch journey, developing his technology, the search for that first believer, and the challenge of turning complex research into a product someone will actually pay for. Today, he's opening up his playbook. No jargon, no fluff, just the truth about the mistakes made, the lessons learned, and the strategies that actually work. So if you're a researcher or academic thinking of making the leap, or an investor looking for a good prospect, this is the conversation you've been waiting for. Luke, how are you?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, great to be here. Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Very well, very well. Welcome, welcome. So I'm going to dive straight in. Imagine you're explaining your company to an intelligent investor who isn't an expert in your field. In simple terms, what is the major problem that you solve?
Well, the major problem that we're solving is the key blocker to decarbonisation over the next 2 decades, which is having enough critical minerals to meet the demand from the energy transition. The key blocker or the key problem here is the time that critical mineral projects, mining projects, take to come online. The average first drill in the ground to an operational mine is 18 years currently. And if we're going to fill the big 30 to 50% gap in critical minerals currently required for the energy transition, that needs to change.
18 years? What takes 18 years? Why does it take so long?
Well, there are a lot of different components. There's permits, there's environmental considerations, but what it really comes down to is how quickly you can gain confidence in the resource that exists underground. In order to gain that confidence right now, what you do is just drill it and then drill it more and drill it more. And the current approach in industry has been the same approach pretty much for the last 50 years. Instead of just blindly drilling over an entire project to try and map it, what can we do that's more intelligent, which reduces the amount of drilling you need to do to get to a certain level of confidence in the resource, which means then you can develop the project much quicker.
Well, because it sounds like a lottery, the traditional approach, and then a very expensive lottery at that in terms of both cash and environment. Okay. And what sort of improvements do you think you can make to that?
We're currently looking at about a 50% reduction in the amount of drilling that you need to do, simply by one, incorporating other data types that aren't necessarily being used well enough, and secondly, just optimizing where you drill to most efficiently reduce that uncertainty rather than just taking an approach of, for example, oh, let's just drill 100 meters by 100 meters over this entire project and just see what happens.
50%. So
Yeah.
does that mean you bring down the cost or also the time? Does it mean you can go from 18 years to 9?
So it's actually depending on which kind of customer segment you are serving. It's either the cost or the time that is more important to them. Our great ambition is reducing the time because we want to bring enough critical minerals to market. And for many companies that are slightly in the later phases, so let's say in the second half of that 18 years, for them it's time. They've already invested a large amount of capital, and any year that the start of production is delayed can cost them anywhere up to $50 million a year. And so if you can reduce that by even 1 year, that's of great benefit. But for the smaller companies that are kind of earlier on in that life cycle, and there's a lot of learnings about how different companies in the industry operate that you learn as you try and sell into that industry. They are much more capital constrained. And for them, it's really how far can we push this project with the amount of money that we have?
Really interesting. So I'm hearing big numbers and I'm hearing big impacts in terms of climate, in terms of getting the minerals out of the ground that we need to make those transitions in terms of cost and time. But it's a very highly technical area. You're talking firstly about using data and using more up-to-date technological techniques than an old industry. but you're also talking about understanding what is a highly complex engineering industry in the first place. It's a highly technical area. Before you started this business, what brought you here?
So I actually worked in the mining industry before I became a researcher. Is how I first kind of learned how things went down in the present day. And it was part of that frustration at the lack of innovation in industry that brought me into research in the first place, thinking that there have to be better solutions or better technological solutions that could help. They're not going to replace what the industry does entirely, but it can be vastly improved if you leverage the right technologies in the right place. So that brought me into research in the first place. And then through research, I really became interested in applying the most modern computational techniques, which nowadays is machine learning and various forms of machine learning, but using that in a real physical world context in kind of the heavy industries that are foundational for society as we know it. And in those industries, data is messy, it's inconsistent, it doesn't conform to the kind of models that are built in computer science schools and labs conventionally. And so what really interested me was trying to bridge that gap of how can we use these modern computational techniques in these environments that are they're not clean, they're not made to just plug and play these kind of algorithms.
Yeah, it's not like clean data that you can try and suck out of a system. It's messy and it's real world and it's site-based and it's all sorts of different types, I would have thought.
Exactly.
Was there a moment? Was there a story? Was there a point where you said, this is ridiculous, we need to change this?
I don't know if there was one moment. I think there's a whole series of frustrations and setbacks and etc., as with any founding story, I imagine. But I think going through as a researcher, well, there was two things. You're seeing all of the research that's coming out, and you publish papers on how you might be able to incorporate different modalities into models and properly quantify the uncertainty, properly do all of this. But it's all at a very theoretical level. And meanwhile, industry continues in the way that it has done, and there's all the kind of hype around applying AI and applying this and that and the other. And that's fine, and some technologies are being applied, but they're not fixing the fundamental problems. AI is often being applied to fix little pieces here and there, rather than going to like the fundamental operation of the industry, which in mining is understanding the resource that's there. And so I guess during my time as a researcher, it was kind of seeing all these exciting new prospects each time. You go to a new conference, you publish a new paper, yet nothing changes out in the industry.
Interesting. So actually getting some of those ideas and getting that research and saying, well, actually, I can see how this could make a difference, but nobody's doing it.
Yeah, more or less.
Getting it done. Interesting. So what was that moment then? You're sitting there, you're seeing all this around you. When did you think, oh, this could all build into something?
Maybe midway, come towards the end of my PhD, and you've published a couple of papers and you've put that out there, and maybe you get a few citations or you get a few accolades or whatnot, but it doesn't really change anything. And you get a bit itchy of like, okay, you start to realize, I think, that unless you go and push that this innovation is going to be applied, no one else is going to come and do it for you. And so I think that, there's a couple of moments. I went and worked in a startup on the side of my PhD, and that was kind of instrumental in showing me, okay, these guys, and it was a spin out as well. And it was seeing that, okay, these guys, they've taken what they developed, they've found some funding, and they're going to push this so that it actually, and this was working on some satellite technologies. They were pushing this to go and, launch this thing into space. And I was like, maybe this is how you do it. Maybe this is how you make stuff happen.
Looking for a way, and then you found a way. You saw someone do something and thought, maybe I could do that too.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the CEO of that company, Marco, he's great. And he very much encouraged me to follow this path, I must say.
Very nice. So you just said translational. Translating technical interest into a startup is a huge leap. And that's the moment you're just talking about. Seeing Marco create that company. Was that the tipping point that made you decide to say, I'm going to leave normal quote unquote work, and I'm going to go and become an entrepreneur? Or was there something else that said tipped you over the edge, as it were?
I would say there's probably two moments. I'd say that was probably the first moment when I decided, okay, I'm going to start a startup to try and spin this technology out. But that was probably 2 years before I actually went full time into doing the startup. During those 2 years, I was forming a business plan and doing as much as I could on the side of continuing research to, best plan the trajectory for a company. But I think a second tipping point came, and I was a postdoc by this point, and it was, the realization that a startup's not really something that you can just do on the side. It became apparent that trying to continue on as a full-time researcher and having the startup, which was unrelated, but not all of the research was going directly into startup, was just infeasible for me anyway. And so at that point I decided, right, we need to find a way to plunge full time into this. And that was a tipping point that happened 18 months ago, I guess. And that's what started me going down the track of, right, I'm going to stop essentially being a researching postdoc and I'm just going to go full time into spinning out this technology. And that was kind of the second tipping point.
So that sounds, so there was a decision point. I can't do both of these things. I have to choose one.
Yeah.
Why entrepreneur as opposed to carrying on research?
For me, it was, one, more exciting. I think research is interesting and is exciting. I think it could be a great career, but right now I just wanted to have more impact more quickly. And I wanted to be able to see and have quite tangible impact. And I think continuing research, you do have impact, but that comes indirectly and maybe in a long time once your research has led to other things that led to other things. And so I decided that at this point in my life, I was going to give it a shot at going and driving that innovation myself. So that's probably why that instead of research. And I've not regretted it yet.
Nice. Okay. So thinking about the people around you, who's the person that gave you the conviction to maybe take that risk, to take that step? Who was your first believer that said, yeah, go for it, Luke?
Yeah, there's a couple. So I already mentioned Marco, who was the CEO that I was working with at the spin out, the satellite spin out that I was working with a few years ago. But then I also did all the entrepreneurship programs I could in the business school here in Cambridge. And there was the leader of that program, Rebecca, and she took a few of us really under her wing. She would identify a few people that she was like, right, you have something interesting. You have no idea how to be an entrepreneur. Let's spend some time. And really, she really put in the time to help us understand what it was that needed to be done. You can formulate plans, you can build business models, you can do all of this as much as you like, but really you just need to get stuck in, start talking to clients, talking to people, and iterating. Even in a deep tech startup, you're not necessarily iterating on the technology itself, but you are iterating on the product. And those are that's a key distinction, is something that you learn and that's not apparent as a researcher there, because the product is not really something you have to think about.
Well, that's really interesting. So can we dive into that for a little bit? So technology versus product, to separate them out. So start with the technology. What was the biggest technical hurdle you had to overcome?
So the technology that was developed during the research at Cambridge was a method for accelerating the reduction of uncertainty in multimodal complex systems. And that was at a theoretical level. And at that theoretical level, we could get acceleration in uncertainty reduction by collecting 50% less data than you would have to otherwise. And that's fine, and that was well proven. But the big theoretical or the big technical hurdle is then, applying that in the real world. So the first pilots were really just demonstrating, okay, this concept that we're pretty sure will work, okay, actually works in the field. In this case, data collection is drilling. And so we can actually reduce the amount of drilling you need to do in this field. And so that was the sort of technological hurdle. And that was hard. There's a lot of like unexpected, quirks with the data, even if it's built for kind of messy and incomplete data, there's always more unexpected things in the data. And also understanding exactly the uncertainty in what and how to translate that appropriately to the right people in the industry. But that was all very much on the technology side. Those were the first hurdles, was getting that first sort of pilot and really proving, okay, this works on the ground. But the product is a whole different thing that we're still iterating with and we'll still continue to iterate with for a long time, I imagine.
Well, yeah, indeed. So you talk about that technology hurdle, and actually it works in the lab, but how does it work in the real world? And that sounded like the big leap. How do we actually make this happen? But then that naturally moves into a product, doesn't it? Because obviously a product cannot come from anywhere unless you've proven that things work in the real world. Talk to me about that difference between product and technology. What have you found in the world that defines that difference?
So the technology is saying the core concept or innovation that we have made works and does this useful thing. Fine. But then the product is, what actually are people going to buy that makes this innovation actually get used? And that's a really key distinction that is maybe not immediately apparent when you start out on this journey. People don't buy a technology. They don't want some algorithm that does something. They want a drill plan, or they want an output that tells them how much resource they have in the ground. And that is the product. That's what you're selling. That product, coming from a research angle, is very hard because it's not something you've thought about before. In research, you think, okay, well, this technology is the best technology, so obviously everyone should use it. But that's just not quite how it goes down. And so you have to, and to get to what the product is, you have to just try stuff. I think you can theorize about it as much as you like, but until you put something in front of customers and they tell you, that's not very good, or hopefully something a little bit more information than that, then you just don't know. And I think assuming that you know what the product is always a mistake. And so it's really key to differentiate those two things.
Well, so let's just follow that path. So hold on. So first, you've got your theory. How did you build your first prototype? Was it in a lab? Was it with research grants? Did you have external funding? Did you have industry partners? How did that all work?
Yeah, so, well, the first pilot, so like technology proof in the field, was funded by, on my fellowship at the Royal Academy, actually. So that's what kept us going through that initial technology proof. And you need your core technological proof and then a bit more before you can then go and get some proper funding, a big amount of funding to really try and scale and go on that journey of finding the product. And so, yeah, that's how the first technology proof was funded.
And then you just said you've then got to go and have a conversation with the customer. You've got to get some feedback. You've got to know what works, what doesn't, iterate around. So how did you identify your first potential customer? How did you find these people to do a bit of validation?
Well, honestly, it's nothing fancy. It is just pure cold outreach is how we found our first customers. We spent days and days spamming people on LinkedIn that we thought might be appropriate. 10% maybe replied. 5% then got on a call to discuss whether they would want to start a pilot. And then we got some pilots. And so it's a pure sort of numbers game. And you try and identify, you narrow it in on who you really think this product is going to serve. You're inevitably wrong, but you've got to start somewhere. And so you think, okay, and for us, who we thought our key target customer were what are called vice presidents of exploration at junior mining companies. And so that is who we narrowed in. We essentially added every single one in the world on LinkedIn and just see who replied. Nothing more fancy than that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful tool though, LinkedIn, isn't it? And but also there's an interesting set of numbers there, because I'm hearing you say, well, about 10% came back and we had conversations with 5%. They're pretty good numbers, actually. They're not bad in that sort of process.
It's also about how you're framing it, right? So in that first instance, what we were looking for, we weren't looking for a commercial contract at that point. You just have to be very honest and clear of what you are looking for, because they know what they are trying to do. They are trying to advance their project. We know what we're trying to do. We're trying to prove this technology. So if you're clear that I have this technology that we're spinning out and we want to be able to prove it, it may help you accelerate your project if it works. And if it does work, then we can talk about commercials further down the line. And you just be very clear about what you're after.
Right. People know where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. So you've talked about doing that pilot, and actually the Royal Academy of Engineering's fellowship helped you through that first bit. How have you funded your company thus far?
So on the back of that, we're on an accelerator. So we were on the Entrepreneur First Accelerator. And so that is also where I met my co-founder. So it's been a bit of a winding road, to be honest. There's been the Royal Academy Fellowship. It's been Entrepreneur First, where I met my co-founder. The underlying technology existed, but that's really when the product side of things sort of became a bit more real. And we started really trying to make this into a business rather than a technological concept. And so that was a fun process. Meeting a co-founder and really building a business case. We then got our first funding out the end of that accelerator back in July, which was kind of pre-seed funding, which allowed us to really roll out more pilots. And so we ended up with 4 pilots finished by the end of October time. And we, at the same time, had done a lot of work, and especially my co-founder had done a lot of work on the business side. Like, what's the business model, talking to the customers, getting the value proposition right, etc., which is then when we launched our big fundraise, which was our seed round fundraise in October.
They're pretty. I mean, that's pretty quick on, right? If you started with a bit of money coming from accelerators, then halfway through the year, straight away into pre-seed, and 3 months later, you're into seed.
Yes, more or less. And I think it is all about kind of that momentum and pace. I mean, I know in deep tech, as it's called, the technology can't advance as quickly as a sort of pure software company, because you have this innovation that takes a long time. But again, I think it's that distinction between the technology and then the company and product. And the company and product, that can move quickly and that can iterate quickly. Even if the underlying technology is not going to change overnight, that whole piece of product and company can move quickly. And so I think that's what we found. And that was coming from, Entrepreneur First was a great accelerator. And, Gabriel, my co-founder, is really, really good at this, is just get the right people in the room, talk to them, figure out that you're wrong and why you're wrong about your assumptions, update your assumptions, and go again. And you gradually navigate towards something that makes sense and that customers are willing to sign at least an intention to work with you, or an intention to enter into a commercial agreement with you. And then we got our first commercial agreement in October, actually signing to engage in a commercial contract.
Nice.
And off the back of that, we proved the technology. We had a very early iteration of a product, and we had a roadmap. We had a viable roadmap of customers will pay this much, and there are this many customers. Therefore, this is a viable business. And off the back of that, we raised more money, which wasn't an overnight thing either, but that's how it went down.
Well, very nice. And everything you said there was all about commercial. It was about, there are this many customers that will pay this much to get this sort of outcome that our technology just happens to be able to deliver, and our products just happen to be able to deliver.
Yeah.
How did you find that process of fundraising?
It's fun. I think that you're never prepared. You're never quite prepared for how much you're going to have to just talk, basically. You're repeating the same thing to so many people again and again and again. And a bit like the cold outreach on LinkedIn. It's a numbers game. you have to hone and refine what you're saying super well. And every time that you get a rejection, which is a lot, you update that and you go on and you go on. And I think the thing that you learn, or maybe the biggest thing that I've learned, is that building a starting startup is really all about resilience. It's a resilience game. If you keep going and you keep doing the right thing, which is figuring out why you're wrong and updating your assumptions, then eventually you get somewhere. And fundraising was the same. So we must have talked to probably nearly 200 VCs in the end, and we raised only there are a few different ones in our round, but yeah, a minute percentage of them will actually give you money, and for lots of different reasons. It's not necessarily that your company isn't valid. You're maybe just not within their thesis, or you're not at the right stage of development, or they don't have the right assets. So it's a little bit like a job interview. You also want to match with the right people that are going to be on your cap table, because you want them to be the most useful that you can as well.
You said you spoke to 200. And you talked about resilience as well. How do you deal with a knockback?
I think so Gabriel and I, who's my co-founder, I think we're very open and transparent. We assume that it's going to take a very long time and there's going to be a lot of setbacks. And it's more not seeing setbacks as setbacks, but opportunities to update which direction you're going in. And so if you are taking every meeting, and each meeting, your objective is to figure out what it was that didn't sit right, or what it was that that person was looking for that you are not providing, then you gradually improve what you're doing and just see it as an opportunity to improve what you're doing. Is it frustrating? Yeah, it's super frustrating. You would love for it to be all over in a day or two, but that's just not how it works. And I think that you have to be prepared for that, and you have to be prepared for a lot of rejection.
Again, really nice, that difference between there's technology here, but that's fine. But what I've got to get right for the customer is the product.
Yeah. And really for the investors, the investors, it's not so much the product itself, but you need to have such a concrete understanding of the opportunities that your technology enables. So the opportunity, yes, to make that initial product, but to go beyond that, what markets can it serve? How much are those markets worth? And if those markets are not worth enough for this to be a really backable business, you have to find a different market or a different way of doing it. And that's not to say it's not kind of compromising on the mission that you set out to do. The mission that you set out to do is only going to be solved if you find a big enough market to get the funding. So finding that market is a way that your technology is going to actually be used and have the impact you want it to have. And it's part of the game you have to play.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a really important point. A lot of people come up with technologies and even products, and they think, well, this is a great thing. But that bit about getting investment, if you need it, it's got to be a market big enough to give those investors a return. They're in the end making money out of your company, and it's got to be big enough. At what point did you realize that was what was happening in those conversations, and how did you get over that?
I think that was definitely one of the big realizations, making the transition to begin with. And honestly, we learned a lot through the accelerator we were on. Both the Royal Academy Fellowship Accelerator and the Entrepreneur First Accelerator were really good.
I also know that you didn't just stick to the UK when you were doing the search.
Yeah.
You took a different route. What was that decision, and what made you make that decision?
So this was the fact that we went and based most of our fundraising over in the US. The reason for that was twofold. One, it was strongly pushed on us by our accelerator on Entrepreneur First. They have a strong thesis that startups have a much higher likelihood of getting funded at an early stage if you do go and base your fundraising over in the US. There is some truth in that, I think. And we were based out of San Francisco for 4 months, 3 to 4 months. We were coming back and forth a little bit for various commitments, but we kind of based ourselves out there just to be close to where the investors are. Investors are like any other community of people. They have their networks. Lots of them know each other. They're all WhatsApping each other. So if you kind of get to meet some and you meet some and you can go for coffee with them, or you can go and have a walk with them, or whatever you're going to do, that's how you get to meet and get the meetings with a lot of these VCs. So it's a little bit like your clients. You want to make some good impressions and then you get word of mouth coverage to other clients. VCs are somewhat the same. You meet some, you make a good impression. Maybe you're not quite the right investment for them, but they will introduce you to others. And so we just found that easier being in the same place as so many investors are. And there is a much bigger concentration of investors in San Francisco, New York. There are a lot in Europe as well, and we did talk to a lot of European VCs, and we do have European investors, which is great. But we just found it better being based over there.
Really nice. You talked about your co-founder, and you met them at the Entrepreneur First, I think you said.
Yes, that's right.
Why them? What was the decision process? How did you come together?
Yeah, so Gabriel's fantastic, and we met at the very start of this accelerator. And Entrepreneur First is a very strange accelerator in that you come in alone. You don't even necessarily have kind of an idea or technology behind you, but some people do. I, for example, went in with the underlying technology and was looking for a good co-founder. And Gabriel and I align very well. So his background is in infrastructure projects and infrastructure project finance. And I was quite lucky because he had built a startup before. And so he brought a lot of the business mindset into what we're doing. But he brought a lot of understanding of the financial side of mining projects. Now, his background was not necessarily only in mining. He worked a lot in energy projects, but just brought a completely different angle to what we're doing. And that's what you want in an early stage company. You want as much diversity of skill and understanding and opinion as you can possibly get. And so we were motivated by the exact same problem, which is the energy transition needs to happen in the next decade and 2 decades, and we need to solve the major blockers for that. And we did our exploration process together of where is the major blocker, really understanding it is this piece in getting mining projects off the ground quick enough that is really stopping that supply of critical minerals. And so going through that together, we built this really strong business and partnership. But why him is, all the skills, all the background, but really you also need to find someone that's in the right place at the right time, willing to drop everything and just commit to going full time into this startup. So again, like the accelerator was fantastic for that because it put us all in a room. There's a little bit like speed dating in that room, to be honest. You go and you talk to everyone, and Gabriel was the most aligned, and then you just start working together. It's a bit like clients, really. You start working together, you see if it works. For us, it really clicked, and it gone very well since then. But that's how we came together.
Lovely. And it's a really nice process, that, isn't it? Some of those accelerators that they're venture creators,
yes,
venture builders that bring people together and get partnerships going.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it was another realization in when I was trying to spin stuff out on the side before committing to full time on the startup was, I have a big lack of understanding or lack of experience in the much more financial business side of things. And so you can learn a lot, and I'm learning a lot, and I have learnt a lot. But having someone else, and I also think starting a startup is hard enough with two of you. I think with one of you, I don't think I would ever sleep. And so I think also on that resilience piece that we were talking about, how do you deal with setbacks, etc. I mean, having a co-founder is completely key in all of that, I think.
Is it just the two of you right now still, or have you built a team around you?
No, we have another 2 machine learning engineers, Fandy and Max. They're fantastic. And we're hiring right now 2 more people. And I think hiring is probably one of the most difficult things at the beginning, because if there's 2 of you going to 3 of you, that third person is essentially going to be a third of the business. And so You want a third of the business to be pretty good, and you need to be able to rely that they're going to perform. And so, yeah, those first hires I think have been very hard. It's gone well for us. It wasn't a quick process, but it's gone well for us so far.
Great stuff. How did you think through who you needed?
It's less about job titles or who you need as a certain position. It's more about understanding what skills it is that you would need to get to the next milestones that you need to hit. So Gabriel and I really sit down and think, okay, these are the goals. We're quite methodological. We both have engineering backgrounds. So we have very concrete goals, 1 month goals, 3 month goals, 6 month goals, 12-month goals, and identify the skills that we currently don't have and that we do need to meet those goals. And then you have to decide, is that one person? Is that two different people? What kind of person would that be? And the job title is almost irrelevant. They can have whatever job title they like. We're more looking for the skills that we need to meet these goals.
So it's about the skills. In fact, yeah, we're similarly, job titles are, in a small company like that, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's external consumption, but not internal. You found your co-founder, you had the technology, you've iterated through a product, you've been through a few accelerators, you've been and got investment, you've been to the States. There's a whole journey here over the last 18 months, I think you said.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah, if that, indeed. Looking back at that journey, is there anything you would change if you could?
I think I would just start sooner. I think going on the accelerator, doing it, you learn. There's loads of setbacks, don't get me wrong, but you just need to get out there and learn. And I think the sooner you talk to more people about your idea and test your assumptions, test what you think is right by talking to people, the quicker you move and the better you can build a company. So the thing I would change is just ramp up quicker the amount of people you're talking to about what you're doing. And it may seem redundant. You may seem sure that this is needed, and regardless of what people say, but someone needs to buy this. Otherwise, you're not going to have the impact that you need to have. So really, it sounds really basic, but just talking to more people sooner.
Yeah, more and more people means more and more information back, more and more feedback means you can iterate quicker, you can get customers quicker, and bring people on the journey quicker with you, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything that maybe it's been a bit counterintuitive, didn't expect, or maybe it's just not the normal Silicon Valley playbook that you've learned as you've gone through?
I think, yes, I think especially going over to San Francisco and going to Silicon Valley and seeing how things are done there, there's positives and negatives of the environment over there. And the kind of urgency and acceleration is a strong positive for getting a business off the ground. But the mentality of essentially needing to drive yourself into the ground to get a product out tomorrow, I think, and this is going against the sort of 996 attitude, I've seen fail time and time again by other startups around us. We work hard, don't get me wrong, but we believe that this business is going to be going for the next 20 years. And if you burn out in the first 2 months, then what are you going to do for the remaining 19 years? And so I think that working, again, sounds quite basic, but work smartly towards goals, not just hard and through the night. And there are so many founders and founding teams in the Silicon Valley playbook that is, let's all live in this big house and work 24/7. And this is the way to work. There are times where we've done, especially when we were fundraising and you're talking to VCs for 12 hours a day and then you're going again the next day, you're burning out a little bit, but that's fine if it's over a week. That can't be how the company functions. And I think that's maybe slightly counterintuitive to the standard playbook, but certainly something that we've learned.
Yeah, it's a long game building and running a company. It's not a matter of weeks, it's a matter of years.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there something that you found along the way, a book, a tool, a way of thinking that you would recommend to another founder?
The first book we were handed on the accelerator we were on was The Mom Test. And that is key. Like, you need to understand how to extract the information that you need from customers and people that you're interviewing. And so you have to read the mom test book. It's short, it's easy to read. You can go and read it on the beach in a day. But it's just that fundamental way of thinking that you need to have, or you're not going to understand what the product is. You may understand what the technology is, but you're not going to understand the product unless you properly do the mum test with the clients that you're interviewing.
Yeah, really, really, really important technique. Anybody, for example, out there doing iCure, read the mum test before you go and have those customer interviews so that you get some useful information back. I completely agree with you, Luke. It's a vital technique. Vital technique. So what's next? What's happening now? You've raised twice. You've done pilots. You've brought a couple of new people on. What's the next milestone?
So for us, the next milestone is now starting to prove out the business model. So we need to get our first subscription repeat contracts. So we have pilots, some of those have turned into commercial contracts, but we now need to have this repeatable sort of business model whereby we are selling a particular product at a particular price again and again. And that's what we need to show. One, in order to verify that we really have the right market segment and that our business model is right, which probably isn't, and we'll figure that out as we try to make this happen. But also that directs how the product goes. So we now, have a very early stage product, and we want to get that into his hand as many customers as possible and iterate. So there's a lot of intermediate goals, but long story short, we need to get to repeating subscription contracts and show that we can start scaling, and also just understand where else in the market we need to go. And that will be dependent on how this goes.
Right. Yeah. So getting the proof that you can get more customers on a repeat basis. And then, as you say, then you can scale, showing you can scale. So then if you need more investment, you can get it. For any potential partners, investors, customers, future employees, anybody listening right now, what's your biggest challenge where our audience could help you?
Our biggest challenge right now, honestly, is recruiting the best people to come on this journey with us at this early stage. We are looking for the best front-end software engineers to come and join us and build the much more visualization producty piece of this. And we're looking for the best geostatisticians, so people coming out of kind of PhDs in geostatistics and geophysics. And I think that is the key challenge we're trying to solve right now. And secondly, which is the perpetual challenge, is finding the best partners to work with, the best innovative mining companies that want to try new stuff. That's what we're constantly looking for, because we want the best partners and as many good partners as possible to really develop this product with.
Fantastic, because it's not just about selling to them, it's actually building the product with them, isn't it? It's a partnership model and a partnership approach.
Exactly.
Really nice. And where can our listeners go to follow your journey, to learn more about Material Difference?
Well, they can follow or add me on LinkedIn, Luke Cullen on LinkedIn, and there will shortly, in the next couple of months, be much more information online about what we're up to. So we've been playing the typical Silicon Valley game of being somewhat in stealth, which really means you just don't have to spend too much time creating a fancy website. But it has now come to the point where we do need a bit more material out there. So follow me on LinkedIn, and there will soon be a lot more content online about what we're up to as well.
And what's the best way of actually getting in touch with you? If you've got either some of those companies listening, or you've got some of those people thinking, oh, I could help them out.
Yeah, again, drop me a line on LinkedIn would be the best way. You'll find me, Luke Cullen, Cambridge, Luke Cullen, Material Difference, or send me an email, luke.cullen@materialdifference.earth.
.earth, very nice. Right,
Luke.cullen
at materialdifference.earth. And ladies and gentlemen, those details will be in the show notes for when you listen to this podcast. Luke, thank you so much. What a fascinating but also quick journey. Difficult tech, hard tech, in what is a very real environment, which is mining, and you've pushed it through in 18 months.
Yeah, it's been a journey so far, and I think it's only going to continue.
Brilliant, Luke. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Bye. Now.